In the spring of 1940, the Nazis conquered Western Europe. The hope of Poles for an early end to the war vanished. The number of prisoners in the Auschwitz concentration camp increased dramatically. They mainly worked on expanding the camp, as well as on local farms. From the very beginning, the purpose of the Auschwitz concentration camp was to destroy people. The influx of new prisoners was endless. Those who performed some function, worked for the camp administration, or who could work indoors had a chance to live longer. In December 1940, several prisoners came up with the idea of creating a camp orchestra in Auschwitz, which could be a way for them to survive. Similar orchestras were also later established in other parts of the camp.
Antoś Gargul, a sergeant in the 20th Krakow Infantry Regiment, was a prisoner in the camp. One day, he requested that he be allowed to bring several instruments from home on which marches could be played. As it was marches, the Germans couldn't refuse, and he received the permission. Gargul wrote home. His wife went to the Gestapo, and they told her, well, let him blow into those trumpets before he dies. I wrote to my family to send me the violin. My darling wife, please immediately send me the violin I last played. Ask Stefan to restring the instrument with good strings and put 2 bows in the case. You don't have to send the music stand. Greetings and kisses. Your loving Henrik. Originally there were 7 of us. We had the following instruments: a violin, contrabass, accordion, trumpet, and saxophone. Where did we get these instruments that were in the camp? They simply requisitioned them from amateur musicians in the area around Oswiecim. We played for the first time on the Feast of the Epiphany in 1941. I didn't have anything to play. I was a percussionist. The camp commander, Fritsch, ordered some SS men to go to Prague and bring back percussion instruments. It turned out that they brought back instruments from Prague's Divadlo Theatre. So I played. One piano was bought, and a second one was found in the Sowa River. The instrument, ruined and in pieces, was taken to the music room, where prisoners repaired it sufficiently that it could be used. This piano had a multicolored keyboard because we didn't have white coating for the keys. Franciszek Niriwo was the first conductor of the camp orchestra. Before the war, he was one of the musicians of the Polish radio broadcasting station in Krakow, a wonderful oboist and chamber music performer. He participated in the last Silesian uprising and was arrested right after the beginning of the war, in October 1939. He didn't know whether he was a Pole or a German. A tragic figure. German order and strength, that impressed him. He was a well-built man and very well-fed prisoner, as other than the conductor of the camp orchestra, he was also the capo of the kitchen. Niriwo composed his own march. I decided to do the same. My march entered the repertoire of the camp orchestra. Niriwo got me out of a horrible work squad where I had to carry bags of cement all day. You couldn't fall down either, for if you did, the capo would stomp on your neck with his boots. My audition before conductor Franz Niriwo went well. I was accepted into the orchestra. Seeing how terribly thin I was, Niriwo gave me half a loaf of bread, saying to those present in the room, "He needs food. He is wasted." There was a rule that musicians were not employed in squads working outside the camp. They worked in the camp, and mainly indoors. There were always more candidates for the orchestra than there were places. Once, a transport of Soviet prisoners arrived. Several dozen musicians wanted to audition. We had almost 40 trumpets. One of the candidates grabbed a French horn, played a couple of scales and passages, and was accepted. When Franz left, I asked, "Why were you so scared?" He said, "Because I have never played the French horn in my life." Of course, in the beginning there was no sheet music or paper. Used cards were collected from a camp office and lines were drawn on them. We wrote down whatever anyone could remember. While one wrote, another harmonized. Later, it seems, we also got blank sheet music from the camp printing office, but the orchestra acquired sheet music thanks to Auchwitz. One day, an older prisoner came up to me and said that before the war, he ran a bookstore in Warsaw, and having 3,000 German marks in the account of the German publishing firm Breitkopf und Härtel, he could help us. Through the mediation of an SS cooperative, the relevant order was placed. We got enough sheet music for an entire symphony orchestra. The orchestra played opposite Barrack 24, under an oak tree. However, in the winter, when the temperature fell below 7 degrees and the instruments froze, the orchestra moved to the music room in Barrack 24 and played through open windows. The orchestra's job was playing marches for the work squads when they left the camp through the Arbeit macht frei gate on their way to work, and when they returned to the camp. We played for the prisoners 4 times a day, in the morning, when all the work squads employed outside the camp left for work, in the afternoon, when some work squads returned for lunch, again in the afternoon, when those work squads again left for work, and in the evening, when all of the work squads returned from work. The purpose of playing was to keep the prisoners in step. The Germans even tried to determine which march would be the most efficient. They practiced with a 100-meter-long column and timed how long it took for the column to pass through the gate. They tried different ways to shorten the time, if only 5 minutes. We played German, Polish and French marches, but the French marches were too fast and the rows couldn't stay in step. The prisoners left for work in rows of 5 abreast, which made it easier to count them. The SS men counted out loud, 5, 10, 15, 20, 100, and noted it all down. When the squads returned from work, they were much smaller. Often 30 or 40 corpses were carried into the camp. It was a horrible scene. I was devastated. I thought I could meet the same fate at any time. But I had to play. I looked at the notes with one eye and the conductor with the other, and frequently I looked at the prisoners returning from work. Many of the work squads were a macabre sight. 4 prisoners carried each of those who had been killed. 2 prisoners in one row of 5 carried the corpse by the arms, and 2 others in the row behind carried the legs. The corpse was carried face down. The prisoners who were staggering under the weight of the bodies were often kicked and beaten by the SS men for not keeping in step with the rhythm of the orchestra. In other rows of 5, staggering half-dead prisoners were held up under the arms. There were cases when someone collapsed just in front of the gate. Others would immediately grab him and pull him through the gate so that he wouldn't be beaten with a riding whip and truncheon for blocking the entrance. Opposite the position of the orchestra, by the gate, lay the bodies of prisoners shot while trying to escape, as well as the corpses of those prisoners killed during work and carried inside to the rhythm of the march. We hated those musicians. In the winter, when we'd gotten wooden clogs, the snow stuck to them. You couldn't walk in them normally. It was like walking on stilts. And we had to pass through the gate in step with the march. We kept tripping. You had to take the clogs off and march barefoot. And sometimes it was 20 below zero. Passing through the gate, we even had to march, military style, in front of the guardhouse. I carried a mate who had died just several hours earlier. His trousers did little to clothe him, and his nakedness was in itself a desecration of death, magnified by the joyful music. The orchestra was an atrocious idea. The role of the camp orchestra can be evaluated in different ways. Members of the orchestra tried to raise the spirits of the prisoners. Some of them were able to hold the attention of the SS men to such a degree that they neglected to search the prisoners returning from work. Czesław Sowul particularly fascinated them. Once I asked him, "How will it all end?" He had no illusions. The chimney or a pit. If we don't die, they will shoot us, torture us. He lived here with this conviction, and he clowned around. As the orchestra played, everyone watched only Czesław with his drumsticks, playing the drums and xylophone. Many a time he mocked the SS men. No one else could have done this. One day, Sayanchuk came to me and said, "I want to live." He was already so far gone that it looked like he had at most a week to live. I said, "Well, son, can you read music?" He knew how, a little, but he was a law student in the second year, I think. I got him into the hospital and fed him. I was a cook, after all. He had enough of an appetite that he was soon well enough to play the drums. In October 1942, he came to see me right after the morning roll call. "Czesław, it's bad." "What is?" "Why, they read out my number." He began to bid me farewell, and later I watched from the barrack, from the attic, how he walked to the wall. He knew that I would stand there and watch. He waved to me. I saw thousands of people murdered every day. But this goodbye. One day after the work squads marched out of the camp under the gate with the inscription, "Work makes you free, Arbeit macht frei," the SS men ordered the members of the orchestra to remain where they were. Those prisoners who were unable to go to work were being rounded up in the camp at that time. They hid in the barracks. The SS wanted to send them to the gas chamber. At one point, Marian Claire rang up to me screaming, "Stasiek, save me. There's a selection for the crematorium." Without thinking about it, I gave Claire a tuba and put him in the back among members of the orchestra. This undoubtedly saved his life. In July 1942, Himmler came to Oswiecim. Before his visit, the camp was cleaned up, sending all the Muselmaner, prisoners already half dead, to the gas chamber. Commandant Hoss showed Himmler and the entourage accompanying him around the camp. Tables for chess and other games were set up along the camp streets. Presentable prisoners were positioned around the camp. On his arrival, the orchestra played a general's march and a regular march when he departed. Niriwo conducted, standing with his back to the orchestra. On Sundays, weather permitting, we gave concerts outside the fence on a rise located between Commandant Hoss's villa and Crematorium No. 1. We performed these concerts for the SS men and their families. Mozart's A Little Night Music was played most frequently, but Adam Kopyczynski also performed Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5. Sometimes when we played on this dais in front of Hoss's house, in this breezy concert hall, the crematorium chimney belched the sweet stench of the burnt corpses. We played various works at that time, fragments of operettas and operas, marches, dance numbers, and others. There was an SS man, probably a singing teacher, who came and enjoyed conducting the orchestra. There were 12 trombonists in the band. He had an idea that when a bass solo appears in a piece, all the trombonists would stand up and play. It was quite a sight. The Germans were happy as larks. After concerts for the SS, we had a 30-minute break, after which we gave concerts for prisoners on the yard of the camp kitchen. They lasted until 8:30 p.m. They certainly would have preferred something to eat, but nevertheless almost half of them came to listen. Thousands of them. SS men frequently came to the music room and listened to rehearsals and concerts. Among others, Palech, who personally shot thousands of prisoners, showed up here. He would come, stand in the doorway, leaning against the frame, and become lost in thought. Often he stood there for long periods. Apparently he loved music. In a strange way, he was able to reconcile various passions. People were afraid of him. It was said he came to select the best candidate for shooting. We often arranged concerts of Polish music, and therefore forbidden music, for a small group of friends. Members of the orchestra, in small groups or individually, sometimes organized unofficial performances in particular barracks, and even in inmates' quarters. I will never forget the clandestine evening performances that Adam organized for us on national holidays. People huddled in corners. Adam sat at the piano and, staring into the distance, played our beloved Polish songs. Adam didn't know that this brought tears to our eyes, that his music instilled the spirit of freedom in us, that we hadn't forgotten where and who we were. Nierewo was released from the camp in 1944 after signing the German Volkslist. When he left the camp as a volunteer for the Wehrmacht, 20,000 people jeered. There wasn't anybody who wouldn't have jeered. When Franz joined the German army and Adam Kopinczynski became the conductor, the character of the orchestra began to change. When good news from outside reached the camp, we played marches of the American composer, Sousa. Beautiful marches. They functioned as a code. The more the SS men were depressed, the more Sousa we played. The orchestra was comprised of Polish prisoners. This was the case until the 27th of October 1944, when the majority of the Polish musicians were transported deep into the Reich. Afterwards, the orchestra was mainly made up of Jewish prisoners, but Adam Kopinczynski remained the conductor. Almost all the musicians from our band left in transports, but the camp authorities kept me to organize and conduct the Jewish orchestra. Thousands of Jews were continuously brought into the camp and straight up the chimney. However, there couldn't only be chimneys in the camp. There also had to be an orchestra.